The sound of shattering glass and terrified screams echoed through the dusty main street of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, as Zara Holloway ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. The year was 1878, and the spring air carried both the promise of new beginnings and the stench of her fear. At 26, she had never imagined her life would come to this, running from men who wanted either her money or her life, possibly both. "You can't hide forever, Miss Holloway." The gravelly voice of Victor Reeves, the most feared loan shark in the county, carried easily in the morning air. "Your father's debts are yours now, and my patience has run dry." Zara's hands trembled as she gathered her torn skirts and calculated her next move. Her father, God rest his troubled soul, had left her nothing but a failing general store and debts that seemed to multiply like rabbits. 3 months after his passing, the vultures had begun to circle. "I'll pay you. I just need more time," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The store had been struggling, and the drought had hit everyone hard. No one was buying anything beyond bare necessities. "Time's up, sweetheart." Another voice joined in. Jasper Reed, Victor's right-hand man, a man whose cold eyes had followed her movements for weeks. "Either we get our money or we take the store. Your choice." Pressing her back against the rough wood, Zara closed her eyes. The store was all she had left of her family. After her mother died when she was 12 and her brother was lost in the war, it had been just her and her father. Now it was just her, alone against men who saw weakness as an invitation. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her eyes snap open. A newcomer, perhaps. Someone who might unwittingly create a distraction that would allow her to escape back to the store, where she at least had a shotgun behind the counter. The hoofbeats slowed, and then stopped. A moment of silence followed. "Gentlemen." The new voice was deep, unhurried, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. "Seems like a mighty fine day to be pointing guns at a lady. Mind sharing what's so urgent it couldn't wait for civilized hours?" Zara peered around the edge of the wagon. A tall man sat astride a magnificent chestnut stallion. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble. His posture was relaxed, but something about the way his hand rested near his holster suggested he was anything but. "This ain't your business, stranger," Victor spat. "Move along if you want to keep breathing." The stranger chuckled, the sound oddly warm in the tense atmosphere. "Well now, that doesn't seem very neighborly." He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the dirt. "Name's Seth Owens. Just rode into town, and I have to say, this isn't the welcome I was expecting." Zara's breath caught. The way he stood confident, unafraid, reminded her of stories her father used to tell about men who had seen too much of death to fear it any longer. "Last warning," Jasper growled, his hand moving to his gun. What happened next occurred so quickly that Zara would later struggle to recall the exact sequence. Seth Owens moved like lightning, his hand a blur. 2 shots rang out, and suddenly Jasper was howling, clutching his hand where his gun had been seconds before. The weapon lay in the dust several feet away, knocked clean out of his grasp by Seth's bullet. Victor froze, his own gun half drawn. "I wouldn't," Seth said quietly, his revolver now pointed steadily at Victor's chest. "Now, why don't you tell me what this lady has done to deserve such treatment?" "She owes us money," Victor said, his voice tight with fury and fear. "Her father borrowed heavy, then had the poor manners to die before paying up. $2,000, plus interest." Zara gasped. The sum was outrageous. Her father had initially borrowed only $500 to renovate the store. The interest was crushing. Seth nodded thoughtfully, as if considering a fair price for cattle rather than a debt that was strangling a woman's future. "I see. And the lady's name?" "Zara Holloway," Victor said. "Owner of Holloway General Store, such as it is." Seth glanced toward her hiding spot. "Miss Holloway, would you care to join this conversation? I promise these gentlemen will behave." Zara hesitated, then slowly stood, brushing dust from her skirt with as much dignity as she could muster. "I'm not hiding, Mr. Owens. I was simply taking cover from flying bullets." A smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. A wise precaution. He turned back to Victor. $2,000 seems steep." "That's business," Victor shrugged. "She's had plenty of warning." Seth reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked heavily. "I'm prepared to settle the debt. 2,000, no interest." Silence fell over the street. Zara stared at him in disbelief. Who was this man, and why would he help a complete stranger? Victor narrowed his eyes. "And what's your interest in this, Cowboy?" "Miss Holloway offering something special in return." Seth's expression hardened, the warmth in his eyes vanishing. "You might want to reconsider that statement, friend. I don't take kindly to insults to a lady's character." Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense intended. But business is business. The interest stands. 2,500. 2,000, Seth repeated. "And you leave Miss Holloway alone from here on out. No more debts, no more visits, no more threats." The standoff continued for several long moments. Finally, Victor nodded. "Fine. But she's banned from credit with anyone connected to me, which is most businesses worth mentioning in this town." Seth tossed the pouch, which Victor caught one-handed. "Count it. We'll wait." As Victor counted, Seth turned to Zara, properly looking at her for the first time. His eyes were a startling blue, like the sky after a storm, and there was something in them that made her heart skip for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Are you hurt, Miss Holloway?" "No," she managed, finding her voice. "Just my pride, perhaps." "Mr. Owens, I don't understand why it's all here," Victor announced, tucking the pouch into his coat. "Pleasure doing business with you, Cowboy, Miss Holloway." He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. "Jasper, get up. We're leaving." Jasper, still clutching his bleeding hand, scrambled to his feet, shooting Seth a venomous glare. "One more thing," Seth called after them. "If I hear that either of you have bothered Miss Holloway again, I won't aim for the hand next time. We clear?" Victor didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed visibly. "Crystal." As they disappeared down the street, Zara finally allowed herself to breathe. "Mr. Owens, I don't know how to thank you, but I must ask, why would you do that for a stranger, and how will I ever repay you?" Seth turned to her, and in the full sunlight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. A thin scar ran along his jawline, and his hands, when he removed his gloves, were calloused but clean. "Let's just say I have a particular dislike for men who prey on those in difficult circumstances," he said. "As for repayment, perhaps you could point me toward a decent meal. I've been riding since dawn." Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling. "I think I can manage that, Mr. Owens. My store has a small kitchen in the back where I live. It's the least I can do." As they walked toward Holloway General Store, Zara stealing glances at her mysterious savior, she could not have possibly known that this chance encounter would change the course of her life forever. The store was quiet when they entered, the bell above the door announcing their arrival to no one. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the meager inventory on the shelves. Zara moved behind the counter, placing her hand briefly on the shotgun hidden there before leading Seth through to the back. "It's not much," she said, gesturing to the small living area with its modest stove, table, and 2 chairs. A curtained doorway led to what was presumably her bedroom. "But the coffee's hot, and I can offer you eggs and bacon." "Sounds like heaven after trail rations," Seth said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door with the casual familiarity of a man accustomed to making himself at home wherever he found himself. As Zara busied herself with preparing the meal, Seth took stock of his surroundings. The room was clean but worn, every object well used but cared for. A small bookshelf held a surprising variety of volumes, from practical farming manuals to poetry. On the mantel above the small fireplace sat 3 photographs: a stern-looking man who must be her father, a gentle-faced woman, and a young man in a Confederate uniform. "Your family?" he asked. Zara glanced over her shoulder. "Yes, my parents and my brother Thomas. I lost them all, mother to fever when I was young, Thomas at Gettysburg, and father last winter to his heart." She turned back to the stove, her shoulders straightening as if physically pushing away grief. "But you didn't come here for sad stories. You must have just arrived in town. What brings you to Eureka Springs?" Seth settled into one of the chairs, stretching his long legs. "I was headed to Fort Smith, but heard Eureka Springs had good water and better opportunities. Thought I'd take a look before moving on." "Opportunities?" Zara set a cup of coffee before him. "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Owens? Seth, please." He took a sip, nodding appreciatively. "Good coffee. As for work, a little of everything, ranching mostly. Did some scouting for the Army after the war. Recently sold my share in a cattle operation in Texas, looking for something new." Zara brought over the plates of food and sat across from him. "Well, Eureka Springs is growing. The springs themselves draw visitors seeking healing. We've got a new hotel being built and talk of the railroad coming through eventually." "And what about you? Always run the store?" She shook her head. "I was a teacher before father fell ill, came back to help him and stayed." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "Times have been hard. The drought last year hurt everyone. Father borrowed to keep things going, but those men took advantage," Seth finished for her. "I've seen their kind before. They don't just want the money, they want what it buys them. Power, control." Zara looked at him sharply. "You seem to know a lot about men like Victor Reeves." Seth's expression darkened. "I've had my encounters." He didn't elaborate, and something in his tone discouraged questions. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before Zara spoke again. "I still don't understand why you'd pay such a sum for someone you don't know. $2,000 is a fortune." Seth set down his fork. "Miss Holloway, Zara, please." "Zara," he smiled briefly. "Let's just say I was in a position to help and chose to do so. I don't expect repayment." "I can't accept that," she said firmly. "I pay my debts, Mr. Owens." "Seth, I won't have simply traded one creditor for another, no matter how much more pleasant the new one might be." Seth studied her, noting the determination in her green eyes and the proud tilt of her chin despite the circumstances. "All right. How about this? I'm looking to settle somewhere for a while. I need lodging, and you have a store that could use some help. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement." Zara's brows drew together. "What kind of arrangement?" "I'll work for you. Help get the store back on solid footing. In exchange, I'll take the room above the store that I noticed has a for rent sign in the window, and will consider my wages as payment toward the debt." "You'd work as a shopkeeper. You, who clearly knows his way around a gun and the open range." Disbelief colored her voice. Seth shrugged. "I told you, I've done a little of everything. Besides, it wouldn't be forever. Just until we agree the debt is settled or until I decide where I'm heading next." Zara considered this, turning her coffee cup in her hands. "People will talk. A single woman with a male lodger who also works for her." "People always talk," Seth said dismissively. But if it concerns you, I understand. Zara made her decision quickly. No, I accept your offer. I need the help and I need to repay you. If people talk, let them. I stopped caring what this town thought of me when half of them turned their backs on my father in his time of need. Seth extended his hand across the table. Then we have a deal, Miss Holloway. She took his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the unexpected warmth. We do, Mr. Owens. Neither of them could have predicted how this simple business arrangement would unfold, or the challenges that awaited them both in the days ahead. Word of the confrontation on the street spread through Eureka Springs like wildfire. By the time Seth had moved his meager belongings into the room above the store that evening, most of the town knew that Zara Holloway had acquired both a savior and a lodger in the form of a gunslinging cowboy from Texas. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. A single window overlooked the main street, giving Seth a clear view of the comings and goings below. He unpacked efficiently, his possessions few. Some clothes, a razor, a worn Bible, a writing kit, and a wooden box that he placed carefully under the bed without opening. When he returned downstairs, he found Zara struggling to move a heavy crate. "Allow me," he said, easily lifting what she had been straining to budge. "Where would you like this?" "By the dry goods shelf, please." She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, watching as he carried the crate without apparent effort. "Thank you. I usually have the delivery boys help with the heavy items, but they've been scarce lately." "Reeves's influence," Seth guessed. Zara nodded. "He made it clear that helping me wasn't in anyone's best interest. I've been managing, but it's been difficult." Seth set down the crate and began unpacking its sacks of flour, sugar, and coffee. "Well, that's changed now. First thing tomorrow, we'll get word out that Holloway General Store is under new management partnership," he corrected, seeing her expression. "People will come back once they know Reeves no longer has any claim here." "You sound very confident," Zara observed. Seth smiled. "I've found that confidence often creates its own reality, Miss Holloway. You should know that confidence alone won't be enough," she cautioned. "Victor Reeves isn't the only problem facing this store. We're understocked, prices from suppliers have risen, and many customers have taken their business to Miller's Emporium on the other side of town. They offer credit." "Then we'll offer something better than credit," Seth said. "Quality, service, and perhaps a few special items that Miller's doesn't carry." "Such as?" Seth's eyes gleamed with unexpected mischief. "I have some connections from my ranching days. Let me send a few telegrams tomorrow." Over the next few days, a new routine established itself. Seth rose early, chopped wood for the stoves, and opened the store. Zara arrived from her quarters at the back to find coffee made, and the day's first customers already being served with a friendly efficiency that she hadn't expected from a man more accustomed to open skies than ledger books. To her surprise, Seth had a natural gift for trade. He remembered names, asked after families, and seemed genuinely interested in what brought people into the store. More importantly, he stood his ground on prices but offered fair deals, earning respect from even the most hard-bargaining farmers. By the end of the first week, business had nearly doubled. By the end of the second, Zara was ordering new stock to fill shelves that had been empty for months. "I don't understand it," she confessed one evening as they sat going over the accounts after closing. "Some of these people haven't set foot in here since Father fell ill." Seth looked up from the ledger. "People like to do business with someone they believe is successful. It makes them feel they're making a good choice. Right now, we look like we're on the way up, not down." "We are," Zara said with quiet wonder. "But it's more than that. It's you. You have a way with people." Seth looked uncomfortable with the praise. I just treat folks how I'd want to be treated, nothing special in that. Zara noticed that despite his easy manner with customers, Seth maintained a certain reserve. He shared little about his past beyond general comments about Texas and his ranching experience. At night, she sometimes heard him pacing in the room above, and once, the sound of him crying out in his sleep had brought her to the foot of the stairs, uncertain whether to check on him. She hadn't gone up. Whatever demons chased Seth Owens in the night were his own, and she respected his privacy too much to intrude. Still, she wondered what had brought such a capable man to Eureka Springs, and what had made him so quick to step into her troubles. One evening in late May, as a thunderstorm lashed the town, Seth returned from the telegraph office with an air of suppressed excitement. "Got some good news," he announced, shaking water from his hat. "That special order I sent for is arriving tomorrow. First shipment of its kind to Eureka Springs. Are you finally going to tell me what this mysterious order is?" Zara asked, looking up from her mending. Seth grinned. "European chocolates, French perfumes, and silk ribbons in colors you've never seen. Along with some finer quality men's items, proper shaving kits, leather goods, imported tobacco." Zara's eyes widened. "Luxury goods? Seth, this is a farming community. Who's going to buy such things?" "Everyone," Seth said confidently. "The women will want the ribbons and perfumes. The men will pretend they don't care about quality shaving soap until they try it. And everyone loves chocolate, especially when they've never tasted anything like it before." "And how did you come by these connections?" Zara asked, unable to hide her curiosity. A shadow crossed Seth's face briefly. "My brother-in-law, he imports goods through New Orleans." He paused, then added, "My sister died 3 years ago, influenza, but Edward still considers me family. He got these items at cost for us." It was the most personal information he had volunteered since his arrival, and Zara recognized the significance. "I'm sorry about your sister. Were you close?" "Very," Seth said simply. "Sarah was older by 2 years, but she looked after me like I was much younger. After our parents died, she was all the family I had." Zara nodded, understanding loss all too well. "Thank you for telling me, and for arranging this shipment, even if I still think you're overly optimistic about selling French perfume in Arkansas." Seth's smile returned. "Wait and see, Miss Holloway, wait and see." As it turned out, Seth was right. The luxury goods created a sensation in Eureka Springs. The morning after they arranged the special display, women from town and surrounding farms flocked to the store, drawn by word of mouth about the exotic items now available. By mid-afternoon, half the perfume was sold, and the ribbons were going quickly. "I've never seen anything like it," Zara marveled as she wrapped a chocolate selection for the banker's wife. Mrs. Patterson actually bought 3 perfumes, one for herself and one each for her daughters. "People have been doing without small luxuries for too long," Seth observed, restocking the depleted display. "The war, then the drought, everyone's been surviving, not living. Sometimes a small indulgence reminds folks that life can offer more than hardship." Zara looked at him with new appreciation. "You understand people very well for someone who claims to prefer the company of cattle." Seth laughed, the sound warming something inside her. "Cattle are simpler, it's true, but people are more interesting." As May turned to June, the store continued to prosper. Seth made improvements to the building, fixing the sagging porch, repainting the faded sign, adding more shelves. Together, they expanded their inventory based on customer requests. The debt that had once seemed insurmountable was being steadily reduced by Seth's labor and his uncanny business instincts. The arrangement was working perfectly, except for one unexpected development. Zara was falling in love with Seth Owens. She hadn't meant to. Had, in fact, promised herself after a disastrous courtship years earlier that she was better off alone. But there was something about Seth, his quiet strength, his kindness towards struggling customers, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words mattered deeply. And then there were the moments of unguarded laughter, the brush of his hand against hers when they both reached for the same item, the way his eyes sometimes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Zara tried to dismiss these observations as wishful thinking. Seth had never indicated any romantic interest. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and a business arrangement, nothing more. Yet on a warm evening in mid-June, something shifted between them. They had closed the store and were sitting on the back porch, enjoying the cooler air after a sweltering day. Fireflies blinked in the small garden Zara maintained, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called. "I received a letter from Edward today," Seth said, breaking a comfortable silence. "He's offered me a partnership in his import business. Says my work here proves I have a head for trade." Zara's heart sank, though she kept her expression neutral. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity." "New Orleans is an exciting city." Seth nodded slowly. "It is, but I've been thinking that I'm not done here yet." "The debt is nearly paid," Zara said softly. "Another month at most by my calculations. You don't need to stay on my account." Seth turned to look at her directly, his blue eyes intent in the fading light. "What if I wanted to? Stay, that is, not because of the debt." Zara's pulse quickened. "Why would you want to stay in Eureka Springs? It's hardly New Orleans." "Perhaps because the things I value aren't found in big cities." He hesitated, then continued more quietly. "Perhaps because the person I've come to care about is here." The air between them seemed to still. Zara couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "Seth, but whatever she might have said was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, several of them, moving fast. Seth was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his gun. "Get inside," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "Now." Zara stood, alarm replacing the warmth that had been building. "Who is it?" "I don't know, but nobody rides like that at dusk for a friendly visit. Go. Lock the door behind you." She wanted to argue but saw the steel in his eyes and obeyed, hurrying inside. Through the window, she watched as Seth moved to the front of the store, his posture alert. One hand still near his holster, 5 riders pulled up in front of the store, dust billowing around them in the last rays of sunlight. Zara's blood went cold as she recognized Victor Reeves among them, along with Jasper Reed, whose hand was still bandaged from Seth's shot. The other 3 were strangers to her, rough-looking men whose faces spoke of violence. Through the partially open window, she could hear their exchange. "Owens," Victor called, not dismounting. "Been a while. Thought you might like to know I checked up on you. Interesting what I found." Seth stood his ground, saying nothing. "Seems there's a man matching your description who's wanted in Texas. Killed a rancher named Blackburn and his son 2 years back. Substantial reward for information leading to his capture." Zara's hand flew to her mouth. It couldn't be true, not Seth. "You've got the wrong man, Reeves," Seth said evenly. "But I suggest you and your friends move on before you make a mistake you'll regret." Victor laughed. "That's not what my sources say. Word is, Blackburn was courting your widowed sister when they had a disagreement. You took exception and 2 men ended up dead." Seth's voice when he responded was deadly quiet. "Blackburn was beating my sister. His son held me back while he did it. When I got free, I defended her. The judge called it justified, but Blackburn's brother didn't agree. He's been spreading lies ever since." "Maybe," Victor shrugged. "Maybe not. Either way, I figure the sheriff might be interested in looking into it. Unless, of course, you're willing to make it worth my while to forget what I know." Seth's laugh held no humor. "There it is. I was wondering when we'd get to the real point. How much, Reeves?" "The 2,000 you paid me plus another 1,000 for my silence." "That's not going to happen." Victor's smile vanished. "Then I ride to the sheriff first thing tomorrow. Your choice, Owens." Seth's stance shifted slightly. "You're not going anywhere tomorrow, Reeves. This ends now. You've had your fun terrorizing this town, but it's over." One of the strangers reached for his gun, but Seth was faster. A shot cracked through the evening air and the man cried out, clutching his shoulder. "Next one won't be so forgiving," Seth warned. "Now all of you turn around and ride out. Don't come back to Eureka Springs. There's nothing for you here anymore." For a tense moment, it seemed Victor might order his men to attack, but Seth's reputation as a gunman had clearly been established that first day, and none of the riders seemed eager to test him. "This isn't over, Owens," Victor snarled, wheeling his horse around. "It is for you," Seth replied. "I've sent telegrams to the federal marshal about your operation. They're particularly interested in how you've been forcing farmers off their land by manipulating loan terms." Fraud doesn't sit well with the law. Victor's face went pale even in the fading light. Without another word, he spurred his horse away, his men following close behind. Zara unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch, her mind racing. "Seth, is what he said true? About the rancher in Texas?" Seth turned to her, holstering his gun. In his eyes she saw fear not of Reeves or his men, but of her judgment. "Yes and no. I did kill Blackburn and his son, but it wasn't murder, it was self-defense. Sarah had married Blackburn after a brief courtship. We didn't know what kind of man he was until it was too late. When I visited them and found him beating her, I intervened. His son attacked me with a knife and I had no choice." "The court cleared you?" Zara asked, her voice unsteady. Seth nodded. "There were witnesses, ranch hands who'd seen Blackburn's violence before. The judge ruled it justified. But Blackburn's brother has money and influence. He's been trying to get his own justice ever since." He paused, watching her face carefully. "I understand if this changes things." "If you want me to leave, no," Zara said firmly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "You defended your sister from a monster. That doesn't make you one." Relief washed over Seth's features. "Zara, he stopped, clearly struggling for words. "Before we were interrupted, I was trying to tell you something." She took a step toward him, her heart hammering. "Yes. These past weeks working with you, getting to know you, I've never met anyone like you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you refuse to be broken by circumstances that would have crushed others." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Zara Holloway. I didn't expect it, and I certainly don't deserve someone like you, but there it is." Joy bloomed in Zara's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Seth Owens, for a man with such good business sense, you can be remarkably blind. I've been falling in love with you since you walked into my life and faced down my demons without a second thought." Seth closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their strength. "May I?" he whispered. Zara nodded, and then his lips were on hers, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. It was a kiss that promised a future, that spoke of protection and partnership in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Seth rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you, I come with complications. Blackburn's brother won't stop looking for me. And I come with a struggling store and a town that's only just beginning to accept me again," Zara countered. "We'll face our complications together." In that moment, with the last light of day fading and the first stars appearing overhead, both felt a certainty that had been missing from their lives for too long. Whatever came next, they would meet it side by side. The confrontation with Reeves marked a turning point, not just in Seth and Zara's relationship, but in how the town viewed them. Word spread quickly about how Seth had stood alone against 5 armed men and sent them running. The story grew with each telling, until one might have thought he'd faced down a small army. More significantly, people began to share their own experiences with Reeves and his predatory lending. Farmers who had lost land, shopkeepers who had paid exorbitant interest, all had suffered in silence, believing they were alone in their troubles. Now, with Reeves gone and federal marshals investigating his operation, the full extent of his influence was becoming clear. "I had no idea so many people were in his debt," Zara said one morning in July as they readied the store for opening. "Mr. Jensen from the livery stable came by yesterday to thank us. Apparently, Reeves was about to foreclose on him too." Seth nodded, arranging a display of canned goods. "Men like Reeves thrive on isolation. They make each victim feel alone, ashamed. It's harder to fight back when you think you're the only one suffering." Zara paused in her sweeping. "Is that why you helped me that first day? Because you recognized what he was doing?" Seth set down the can he was holding and turned to her. "Partly. I've seen his kind before, but mostly." He smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "Mostly it was you, standing there behind that wagon, terrified but refusing to run. I admired your courage before I even knew your name." Zara felt a blush warm her cheeks. Their courtship, conducted in the open view of the entire town, had been the subject of much gossip, but neither cared. After facing down Reeves, the whispers of neighbors seemed trivial. As July turned to August, the store continued to flourish. Seth's contacts provided them with goods that couldn't be found elsewhere in the county, drawing customers from as far as 20 miles away. Zara's natural talent for organization complemented Seth's flair for sales, and together they built something neither could have achieved alone. Their personal relationship deepened as well. Evening walks, Sunday picnics by the spring, quiet conversations on the porch, each moment together strengthened the bond between them. Seth gradually shared more about his past. His childhood on a small ranch in Texas, the loss of his parents to a fever that swept through their community, his time scouting for the Army. Zara, in turn, spoke of her dreams of reopening the small school where she had once taught, of her love for books and learning, of the children she hoped to have someday. They built a vision of a future together, piece by piece, day by day. By mid-August, Seth had paid off the remainder of his debt to Zara through his work at the store. The ledger was balanced, the agreement fulfilled. That evening, after closing, he took her hand and led her to the back porch where they had shared their first kiss. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, his usual confidence giving way to a nervous energy she'd never seen in him before. "Now that our business arrangement is complete." Zara's heart skipped. "Yes." Seth took both her hands in his. "Zara Holloway, when I rode into Eureka Springs, I was a man without direction, running from a past I couldn't change. Then I found you, or perhaps you found me, and everything shifted. You've given me purpose, partnership, and a love I never thought I'd find." He dropped to one knee, producing a small box from his pocket. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Inside the box was a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small diamond that caught the last rays of sunlight. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was perfect. "Yes," Zara said, tears blurring her vision. 1,000 times yes." Seth slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, sealed in the golden light of evening, witnessed only by the garden they had tended together and the store that had brought them to each other. The wedding took place in September, when the hills around Eureka Springs were beginning to show the first hints of autumn color. The whole town turned out for the occasion, the church filled to capacity. Even those who had once whispered about the impropriety of their living arrangement now beamed with approval as Zara walked down the aisle in a dress of cream silk, a gift from Seth's brother-in-law, who had traveled from New Orleans for the ceremony. "Never seen a more beautiful bride," whispered Mrs. Patterson to her neighbor as Zara passed. At the altar, Seth waited, looking uncharacteristically formal in a new suit, his usually untamed hair slicked back, his face freshly shaved. But his eyes held the same warmth they always did when he looked at Zara, and his hands were steady when he took hers. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to stand by each other through whatever challenges life might bring, to build a home and a future together, to love without reservation. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation seemed to shake the very rafters of the small church. Eureka Springs had taken this couple into its heart, seeing in their union a symbol of the town's own renewal after years of hardship. The celebration continued well into the night, with tables set up in the town square, lanterns hanging from every available branch, and music provided by local fiddlers. Seth and Zara danced beneath the stars, surrounded by the community that had become their extended family. "Happy, Mrs. Owens," Seth murmured in her ear as they swayed to a slow melody. Zara looked up at him, her heart so full she could hardly speak. "More than I ever imagined possible." Later, as they prepared to leave the celebration for the privacy of their home, no longer separate quarters but a shared life, the town's mayor approached with an envelope. "Wedding gift from all of us," he explained, handing it to Seth. "Least we could do, considering." Inside was a document, a deed to the land adjacent to the store, perfect for expansion. "We can't accept this," Zara began, overwhelmed by the generosity. "You can and you will," the mayor said firmly. "This town owes you both. Not just for ridding us of Reeves, but for reminding us what community means. That store of yours has become the heart of Eureka Springs. We want to see it grow." As they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, the deed tucked safely in Seth's pocket, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the terror of that morning on the street, facing Reeves and his men alone, to this moment of complete happiness, it seemed impossible that less than 6 months had passed. "What are you thinking about?" Seth asked, noticing her pensive expression. "How quickly life can change," she replied. "How the worst day of my life became, in a way, the best because it brought you to me." Seth squeezed her hand. "I believe there are no accidents in this life. I was meant to ride into Eureka Springs that day, meant to find you." "A romantic notion from such a practical man," Zara teased gently. "You've made me a romantic," he admitted. "Among other things." As they reached the store, their home, Seth stopped and turned to her. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a bank draft for $2,000, the exact amount he had paid to Reeves. "Seth, what is this?" Zara asked, confused. "Your independence," he said simply. "I know you've worried about being financially dependent after seeing what happened to your mother when your father made poor decisions. This money is yours, to use however you see fit. Your security." Tears welled in Zara's eyes at this profound understanding of her deepest fears. "I don't need this anymore," she said softly. "I have you. We're partners in everything now." "Yes, we are," Seth agreed. "But take it anyway. Perhaps for that school you've talked about reopening, or for our children's education someday." Zara stood on tiptoe to kiss him. "Our children," she repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that idea very much." Seth lifted her into his arms with a laugh. "Mrs. Owens, I believe it's time I carried you over the threshold." And so he did, into the home they would share, into the future they would build together, one day at a time. The years that followed brought both joy and challenges to Seth and Zara Owens. With the land gifted by the town, they expanded the store, adding a second story that housed not only their growing family but also a small lending library, Zara's dream realized on a modest scale. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Zara's brother, arrived in the summer of 1880, his birth greeted with celebration throughout Eureka Springs. A daughter, Sarah, followed 2 years later, her name a tribute to the sister Seth had lost. The children grew strong and healthy, surrounded by love and the extended family of the town. Thomas inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's love of books, while Sarah showed early signs of Seth's business acumen, setting up a lemonade stand outside the store at the tender age of 6. The store itself became a cornerstone of the community. As Eureka Springs grew, benefiting from the health seekers who came for the springs and stayed for the clean air and peaceful surroundings, Holloway Owens General Store, as it was now known, evolved to meet the changing needs of the population. They added a post office counter, a telegram service, and eventually became the first store in the county to install a telephone. Seth's past surfaced occasionally once. A bounty hunter passing through town recognized him and tried to claim the reward still offered by Blackburn's brother. But by then, Seth's standing in the community was unassailable. The sheriff, a friend who had heard the true story of the Blackburn incident long ago, escorted the bounty hunter to the town limits with a warning never to return. As for Victor Reeves, he received 10 years in a federal prison for his fraudulent lending practices and never returned to Arkansas. Jasper Reed fled to Indian Territory and was reportedly killed in a saloon fight a year later. In the spring of 1884, Zara's dream of reopening the school came to fruition. Using the wedding gift money Seth had given her, supplemented by contributions from the town, she established a proper schoolhouse with 2 classrooms and hired a young teacher from St. Louis to assist her. Though her duties at the store and as a mother limited her teaching time, the school became her pride and joy, offering education to children who might otherwise have gone without. One evening in 1888, 10 years after Seth had ridden into town and changed Zara's life forever, they sat on the same back porch where they had shared their first kiss. Their children were asleep upstairs, the store was closed for the day, and a comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the familiar chorus of crickets and the distant sound of a piano from the new hotel down the street. "You ever think about that day?" Zara asked, her head resting on Seth's shoulder. "When you first came to Eureka Springs?" Seth's arm tightened around her. "Often, though I remember it differently than most folks tell it now." The story had indeed become something of a local legend, embellished with each retelling until Seth had single-handedly fought off a dozen men to save the beautiful shopkeeper. "How do you remember it?" Zara asked. Seth smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling. At 40, his hair was beginning to show strands of silver, but he was as handsome to her as the day they met. "I remember being lost," he said quietly, "not just in direction but in purpose. I'd been wandering since Sarah died, unable to settle anywhere, unwilling to form attachments that might end in more loss." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes reflecting the last light of day. "And then I saw you, hiding behind that wagon but refusing to cower, and something inside me recognized something in you. A kindred spirit, perhaps, someone who understood loss but hadn't surrendered to it. Zara reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw that had faded with time but never disappeared completely. "I was so afraid that day, not just of Reeves but of the future, of ending up alone with nothing but debts and regrets." "And look at us now," Seth said, gesturing to the home they had built, the business they had grown, the life they had created together. All because a desperate woman and a wandering cowboy found each other on the dusty street of a small town in Arkansas. "Providence," Zara said with a smile, echoing what Seth had said on their wedding night. "Providence indeed," he agreed, leaning down to kiss her as the first stars appeared overhead. In the decades that followed, Eureka Springs continued to grow and change. The railroad finally came, bringing more visitors and opportunities. The 20th century arrived with its automobiles and telephones, transforming the once isolated town into a thriving community connected to the wider world. Through it all, the store remained, passed eventually to Thomas when he returned from college with a business degree and ideas for modernization that his father, now content to spend his days helping Zara at her expanded school, heartily approved. Sarah married the son of the town doctor and opened a millinery shop next door, specializing in hats and accessories that she designed herself, many inspired by the luxury items her father had first brought to Eureka Springs so many years before. And Seth and Zara grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year, their story becoming part of the town's folklore, how a brave cowboy had rescued a woman drowning in debt, and in saving her, had found salvation for himself. On warm summer evenings, they could often be found on their porch, surrounded by grandchildren, Seth's deep voice recounting tales of the Old West, while Zara's gentle corrections kept the stories firmly grounded in truth rather than legend. "Grandfather," their oldest grandchild asked one evening, "were you really not afraid when you faced those bad men?" "Not even a little." Seth exchanged a glance with Zara, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. "I was afraid," he admitted. "But sometimes the most important thing isn't being fearless. It's being afraid and doing what's right anyway." "Like grandmother did," the child said wisely, "when she stood up to those men even though she was scared." "Exactly like that," Seth agreed, reaching for Zara's hand. "Your grandmother is the bravest person I've ever known." Zara squeezed his hand, thinking of all they had faced together over the years, both the challenges and the joys, the sorrows and the triumphs. "And your grandfather," she told the children, "is the best man I've ever known. Remember that, all of you. Real courage isn't about guns or fists. It's about standing up for what's right, protecting those who need protection, and building something that lasts." As the children listened, wide-eyed, to stories of a West that was rapidly fading into history, Seth and Zara shared a private smile. Their legacy wasn't just the store that bore their names, or even the school that educated the town's children. It was the love they had found and nurtured, a love that had transformed not just their own lives, but the life of an entire community. From that fateful morning when Seth had ridden into Eureka Springs and faced down Zara's tormentors, to this peaceful evening surrounded by the family they had created together, their story was one of courage, redemption, and the enduring power of love to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. And in the end, that was a legacy worth far more than any debt paid or fortune, earned, a truth as enduring as the hills surrounding Eureka Springs, and as constant as the springs themselves, flowing clear and true beneath the Arkansas soil.